In this episode, we'll be learning about how to work with dates and time in Python using the datetime and time modules. Let's get started by using the datetime module. So we'll import it, and then we'll check it out. We're going to learn how to use the datetime's date submodule, time delta, and datetime. Alright, so it's just easy enough to show you what's going on here. Datetime dot date. And if we pass it a year, month, day, we should get back a date object. Something like that. It's actually smart enough that if you give it a bad date, it'll throw an error. So let's give it like the 13th month. You end up with a value error, and it tells you the month has to be between 1 and 12. So you know that the datetime.date module works the way you want it to. I use it probably the most for database work. I'll use dates and convert them between datetime.date or datetime.datetime and use them in Python and then convert them back to whatever the date format that the database needs. This is one of the things that you would probably use it for the most. Next up, we're going to look at datetime.datetime. Now before we move on, I want to show you one more trick that you can do at datetime.date. So we have datetime.date, and then you can actually call the today function, and it'll give you today's date. And I believe if you go ahead and make an object that you store this date in, you can then do date.year or d.day, and it'll pull it out for you automatically. Now let's move on to the datetime.datetime. Datetime.datetime is basically the same thing as datetime.date, but with extra information. It includes the datetime.time object. Basically what this gives you is it gives you a couple of additional arguments like hour, minute, and second. You can also specify the microsecond and time zone information too. Let's take a look. So we have datetime.datetime, and it'll pop up that information for you and tell you what's optional and what you absolutely need. In this case, it absolutely wants us to put in the year, month, and day, it looks like. So let's do that. And we'll put in today's date. If you hit enter, it'll fill in the next two for you. So it zeroes those out because you didn't specify them, which happen to be hour and minute. Now if you go ahead and do what we did earlier and we set it up so it's stored somewhere, you'll also have access to the same items that we had before. So you'll still have d.year, but now you also have d.minute, which happens to be 0, and d.hour, which will also be 0 because we didn't set those. This is really handy if you need to be really exact in the time that you're getting. So as before, we had datetime.date.today. Well, of course, this has a today too, and it's way more accurate. Let's go ahead and call that, and you'll see that it's giving us today's date. It's the 20th hour, 49 minutes past the hour, and 12 seconds, and then you've got the microseconds there at the very end. You notice it didn't actually print up the time zone. So let's go ahead and save away that today's date, and I'll show you how to do some manipulation with that information. So, alright, we'll do today equals datetime.datetime.today, and then we'll use the strif time. Basically, it's a string format time. Both the time module and the datetime module have this functionality. And you'll probably want to read up on exactly what the different things are you can use for it, but I'll just tell you what I'm doing right now. So we got %y for year, dash %m for month, dash %d, dash %h for hour, dot capital M, dot %s, and the capitalization and matters in this particular case. So what this will give us is a formatted date. This is really handy because you can then format your date into pretty much any kind of format that you need to, including the ISO standards and whatever you need to just do, and it'll format it however you tell it to, with the dashes, periods, spaces, whatever you need it to do. There's a whole bunch of different variables you can put in here, so I really recommend you check out the table on their website. And now we're ready to look at datetime.time delta. The cool thing about the time delta portion of datetime is that it represents a time duration. So in other words, it is the difference between two dates or times. Let's take a look at a really simple example. So we'll get now, which is datetime.datetime.now, and then we'll create a then object, which will be datetime.datetime. And let's just do something kind of random, like 2014 to 26. Okay. So our delta will be now minus then. That kind of tells us what we've got here. If we do delta dot days, we'll see there's 579 days. And delta.seconds will give us how many seconds there were between these two dates. You can use this for lots of things, like calculating how old someone is by seconds, days, and whatever. You can check to see all kinds of different things. So for example, if you wanted to calculate how many hours there are, since that's not actually part of the delta that we get back. For example, let me show you here. There isn't really any hours here, so if you want to calculate the hours, you'd have to do something like delta.total seconds. So that gives us a whole bunch of seconds there, and divide it by like 3600 to give us a rough estimate of how many hours there are. So there's 13,000 hours, almost 14,000 hours between these two dates. And then of course you can do minutes too. Alright, so now we're ready to move on to the time module. Now the time module provides the Python developer access to various time-related functions. It's based around what is known as an epoch, the point when time starts. In Unix systems, the epoch was in 1970. To find out what the epoch is in your own system, let's import time and just check it out. So time, GM time, and then put it past it 0. And it'll tell us it was 1970, first month, first day, 0 hour, minute, second, third day of the week, third weekday anyway. So anyway, that kind of gives you an idea of what that'll give you. The time module has a ton of different things in it. We're going to focus on just a little subset of it. But just to give you an idea, there's the dir on it. So we're going to focus on time.ctime, the sleep, the strf time, and time.time. So let's see what time.ctime gives us. That kind of gives us a formatted time of what today's date is. You'll notice that today happens to be Monday, September 28th. If you don't pass it anything, you just get the current time like you see here, but you can also pass it like at the number of seconds that you want. So let's try that. Let's do time.ctime. And let's pass it that delta that we had up above. And we used total seconds before, so we'll just try that out and see what we get. So the seconds that we passed to it returned Tuesday, August 3rd at, let's see, 1500 hours, which would be around like 3:49 in the afternoon. That was pretty cool. The next thing we want to look at is time.sleep. Now time.sleep is something that you would use to give suspend execution of your script for whatever number of seconds that you needed to just kind of hang out. So it's like putting a pause in your program. I like to use it for waiting for like a file to finish closing, or a database commit to finish committing, or just for some task where you have to put a little pause in to make it look a little bit like a human has done at something. So if you're doing automation, you might need to put some pauses in so the software can keep up with all the fast typing of the computer. So let's take a look at that. So we have our time module. We'll do a range because it makes a lot more sense. So we'll do a range of 5. Then we'll do a time.sleep of 2 seconds. And then we'll print slept for 2 seconds. And we'll get this going here. So you'll see there's a pause while it waits, and then there's another pause through each step for 2 seconds apiece. If you had run this without the time.sleep, it would have printed it really, really fast. So for example, let's just try that. Pop this down here, get rid of our time.sleep, and just run it the way it is, and it immediately prints. So you can see where the difference is there. The sleep just adds kind of a suspended animation for your program. And it's good for testing purposes too. If you need to simulate a long-running process, you can do a time.sleep to simulate it. So now we're ready to move on to the time.string format time part of the module. It's very similar to the date string formatting part that we looked at earlier. In fact, it's almost exactly the same. So the main difference is what it accepts for input. So in the time module, it accepts a tuple or a struct time object, like those that you get returned when you call time.gmTime or time.localTime. So let's just take a look at how that works here. So we have time, striff time, basically, string format time. And we want to tell it what format to do. So let's do something like this, y, m, d. This is a fairly common timestamp. %s. And that looks right to me. And then we want time.localTime. And that should give us today's date in a particular format. And as you can see, that's exactly what it did. So basically you just want to pass it a struct or like that, like I said earlier, the datetime object, or I mean the struct time object, which is what this is actually giving us here. Let's just grab this out of there and try running that. So now you can see that's a time.structTime object with a bunch of little pieces in it. That's basically what we're passing the string format time function. Alright, now we have one more thing to look at, and that's time.time. Now the time.time function will return the time in seconds since the epoch as a floating point number. Pretty simple, but let's take a look at it because it's important. Time.time, boom, you have the number of seconds since the epoch, and that's a pretty big number. The main reason you want this is that you can use it to save the current time to like the database, and then you don't want to convert the date to the database's datetime method. You just save the raw time that you're doing the commit or the save. And then when you pull it out, you can use like the ctime method that we looked at earlier to find out what this actually means. So let's see, you got time.ctime and then time.time, and that'll tell you what day it was that you just pulled out of the database for your committal. At this point, you should be able to use the time module and a lot of its functions right out of the box. You know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, I recommend you check out the Python standard library's documentation. It has all the documentation you need to learn how to use this module even more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time.